Watch the night in Canada.
That's been like a consistent musical theme throughout the whole pandemic for us, right?
Yes, Canadian artists, and as diversity of Canadian artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Huxley Workman was one
this
of,
specifically,
yeah.
yes. Yeah, he's been in our living room since April was the first one?
Did he do the first one in
May.
April or March? Like, he was pretty fresh out of the...
Yeah. Because he was pulled off a tour. He was supposed to play in Guelph, I think, on the 12th of March. With Sarah Slean. And then everybody was sent home. And we all were sent home.
And so Hogweed Workman started doing these shows from his parents' basement.
His in-laws, his father-in-law's basement
in Peterborough.
Because he'd moved from Montreal and had been caught without a finished house.
Yeah. So anyway, we've been listening to Hogweed Workman do all of the live shows from his father-in-law's and mother-in-law's basement since the beginning of the pandemic. So it's kind of a special group for us, and we hope you enjoyed it. We're still letting people in, so we'll wait until that kind of plateaus a little bit before we dive right in.
Questions in the chat about the midterm, same formatting as the first, and I presume you mean like the layout of the questions, and so yes, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing, Smith, if you wouldn't mind really quickly setting up a Mentee, because I totally forgot to do a Zoom poll.
Checking the email.
Yeah. I was busy fixing slides, actually, and I forgot to do a Zoom poll for, so it can just be a multiple choice and then just A, B, C, D, E, and we'll just keep it up at the same time. Amazing. Okay.
Look at Mentimeter.
Oh, it's different. That's Manymeter. Yeah. I can do it.
Nope.
No?
Nope.
Okay, good. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Since last we spoke, still some people coming in. So since last we spoke, we've released the grades for the midterm. Well done. It's hard to, I hate using information like class averages because really you are not all the same. You're from different groups. You have different challenges. Some of you are only taking this course. Some of you are taking 5 courses. Some of you are, managing family. Some of you are managing illnesses and other challenges. And so, the class average doesn't represent anything that should relate directly to you and how you're doing. But that being said, the class average was much higher than it usually is. And so we're delighted. And of course, this was probably for a lot of you, your first university midterm. And so I usually end up having to take the brunt of the sticker shock. But let me explain and simply say, if you haven't read our announcement, that it is going to probably be much lower than you were used to receiving on other exams. It's not because we grade harder. It's that the expectations are a little bit different. And if you want to know about the grading policy of the university, please go and take a look at it. We have like the first text of it printed out in our course outline, but then there's like a whole follow-up for, what an A means, what a B means, and stuff like that. Not to say that we agree with it, because if you'll take a look, an A actually means that you've exceeded expectations, which I think is ridiculous because
it's a ridiculous way to
how are you supposed to know what the expectations are and then how to exceed them? But yeah, that's the policy by which we are all bound. We did our very best to give you as many of the points and grades as possible. We've gone through and checked. It looks like the grading was done well. If we've made a mistake, please go ahead and get in touch. Let us know what mistake we have made, and we will do our very best to fix it. What else? I think that's it for the midterm. Do you have any questions? You can pop them in the D2L chat. And meanwhile, we are going to go ahead and put up the homework question. We're going to have it as a Mentee because I totally just didn't make a Zoom poll. I forgot. We'll get you to read the question, work through it, and then when we have the Mentee information, we'll let you know, and then you can go and sign in and let us know what the answer is. But first, wait, I have to back up. I have to screenshot this because it is beautiful. Save. Yes, it is saved. Thank you very much. And I will clear it and put up the homework. Here are our learning outcomes. And here's the homework question. So start reading. Don't answer anything yet. We'll give you the Mentee information in a second. But you can get started. Oh. Right. You know what? I bet you they want to have a copy of this as well. So what I'll do is I'll take this and...
There's A, B, C, D, E?
Yeah, A, B, C, D, E. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it somewhere.
Okay, I'm going to post it in the chat. It's ready.
Okay, this is terrible. We used to have a split screen option when we were in face-to-face that made it a lot easier to put up like 2 screens at the same time. So just hold on, give me a second here. There we go.
So the Mentee information for the homework question, go to www.mentee.com and enter 28 71 18 4.
I think this is going to be better. Okay, let's try that. Okay, good. So for Mentee, you can enter the answer if you go to www.mentee.com and type in the code
28 71 18 4.
Okay, good.
Mentee deleted all of my information on my account.
You had to set up a new account.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is pretty good for
well done.
Spontaneous account.
Oh, that's impressive.
Set up.
Okay.
Yeah. You might notice that when you're in the Mentee that it'll have that fresh Mentee account smell. What is the question?
What is the question? Yeah. It's a good question.
Somebody's playing bingo.
Bingo. Oh no. Is there like a behind the scenes Jacobs and Smith bingo card?
I don't know.
And we said something that like...
Oh, really?
Maybe.
And we've already done it? The 5 predictable
I guess so.
5 predictable things, we've already achieved it?
Yeah. Yes.
And yes, Bacchus, I think it is impressive how well you can all color using limited zoom color annotations.
Yeah, super good.
Second midterm is open book, yes, in the same way that the first one. Open interwebs.
Yeah, we think that that most of you enjoyed, as far as enjoyment of exams go, most of you enjoyed the midterm format. And so we are going to do the same thing. So a bunch of true-false questions about some data that we'll give you, and then some short answer. yeah, we hope that you enjoyed it. The feedback that we've had from those that are sharing feedback is that it was good. So we will continue.
Oh, it was the way we were reading out Mentee numbers.
Okay, cool. How are we doing for Mentee
answers?
participation? Yeah, 147 have clicked in. We'll give you a bit more time.
How do you see that?
Down at the bottom there.
I know, but how do you see that?
Oh, with my eyes.
Mentee's currently trying to give me a tour. It's like, fuck off. I mean,
Look.
it's like, WTF, Mentee? Where's the fries, Mentee?
Shh, they're working.
I presume they mute us.
Yeah.
I sure would. Is this the one where the arrowhead points toward what is being eaten? I don't remember.
Yes. Yeah, so just if you want to figure out like which way everything is pointing, just start with the top predator, start with humans and look down and go, yeah, okay, humans eat cod, cod don't eat humans, so that's how the arrow goes.
But it's a good question because
Yeah.
we talked about in that they're normally they follow the energy, but in this case they follow the activity.
Yeah.
The predation. Or the action.
How are we doing, Mentee? Look at all these tabs that you have open.
Yeah, some of them are going to be in the Smithsonian because they've been open for as long as I've had the computer. How many of you file information by open tabs? And then when you have a systems failure, it's just like, I don't know what I was working on.
Yeah. Okay, so what we see is it's a toss-up between two. Yes, so here's the thing. Most of you have the correct answer. We can't share, unfortunately, because we're doing it on two different computers. So let me tell you what most of you have indicated. Most of you have indicated the answer is D, and you are correct. So the answer is D. Let me just put a heart right next to that as the correct answer. Well done. Though quite a few of you did indicate that the answer was B, and B is not the right answer. And this is why. So yes, juvenile cod do feed on zooplankton. But the idea is if you take a look at the number of different lines, arrows that are pointing to zooplankton, so do a lot of things, which is indicative of then the zooplankton population being very, very large, very abundant, okay? It means that there are a lot of zooplankton that are able to support pretty much like the base of this food web. So it's unlikely that juvenile cod, if introduced, given that they were already there, if introduced, would eliminate zooplankton from the ecosystem. They could certainly displace some things, some other competitors, but it's not likely that they were going to eat all of the zooplankton, right? And so we can basically use the food web to infer things like population sizes and stuff like that.
Somebody's asking about, so those lines, does that indicate that adults eat juveniles? And yes.
Yes, it does.
And so yes, it's a tough world.
It's a tough world out there. Okay, but for D, if we take a look at the crab and the shrimp, here we have crabs over here, and we have shrimp over here. If the juvenile cod do grow up to be adults, you can see that they eat shrimp and they do eat crab. And because the only really other competitor, silverhake is part of that group for the shrimp, but the major other competitor of crabs and shrimps are humans. and there's not that much other things that eat crab and shrimp. Oh, but the juvenile cod do, as well. So the adults and the juveniles are eating crabs and shrimp. It would reintroduce that competition with humans, which would probably have a greater impact. Because we would infer, based on the fact that there are few connections to other things, that the crab and the shrimp populations are probably in lower abundance, especially compared to zooplankton. I hope that makes sense. Food webs are complex systems, and what I love about them is all of the things that we can infer about them, understanding that there are some pretty big limitations, right? But it's really cool how you can kind of dive into them.
And I think it's one of the interesting ways that you think about science being iterative, that you would revisit this kind of thing as new information comes about. So in this way, this is a food web with some of these boxes, like we talked about shrimp and zooplankton and phytoplankton. Those are boxes that aren't species. Some of these boxes are species names. Some of them are job names, functional groups.
Yeah.
And if you learn more about those species, the taxa that are in those functional groups, you might unpack them and learn more about in which way energy is actually moving, and learn about sensitivities to predations. So it's a really it's a fascinating area, and Guelph has got a lot of good people who study food webs, and if you love math and ecology, this is a great area.
Awesome. Yep, I really like it. Okay.
If you love box and whisker plots, this is a great area. If you like, yeah.
Box and whisker plots.
Yeah. So thank you, Charles Elton, for the idea years and years and years ago, 1927.
Wow. Okay, cool. Thank you.
And that's it.
That's it. We're done. No.
There's lots of people sharing tab open, number of tabs, ages of computers when 4 tabs would make you scared to have them open, and then 50 plus tabs, and then somebody who, when we asked, they shouted out the number of tabs they had open. And I like that idea, that this is call and response. That
Okay. So, invasive species are a thing.
And you've been going through your online unit, working your way through the dairy bush digitally this year. We would be joining you there this week if it was a normal year. But you've seen the unit talking about different kinds of invasive species or translocated species like garlic mustard. This is another one in this scenario. This is kind of a large scare you. This is a scare you kind of a species. Maybe some of you have run into it. Giant hogweed. It does some incredible things. The seeds, it produces up to 100,000 per year, and they can remain viable in the soil. I told you, we're closed.
That's the phone.
Yeah. But we're open.
That's what a phone used to sound like when we were growing up.
If I did this, how many of you know? I had a party line. That's how old I am. And not like...
Okay.
One long, two shorts.
On topic.
It's the Smith family. I return. More than 100, around 100,000 seeds per plant, and those seeds can remain viable in the soil for up to 15 years. So when you think you've eradicated it, in many cases you haven't. You've just done the surface. The winged seeds can float or fly in the wind for meters, many meters. It can shade out other native plants. This is a thing that in open field or newly cut areas, this becomes a problem once it's introduced. And it's partially a problem, and it's a problem that we notice maybe more than all of the other plants that respond in these same ways. Many European species that have been translocated here with human transport in the last couple of hundred years, is that this one hurts us. And it produces this secondary compound called furocumarines.
So for any sort of sci-fi people out there, like we're talking like real life Day of the Triffids, like full on, they are terrible plants. Now they won't like consume you like a Triffid will. Nerd. Read Day of the Triffids though if you haven't. It's a most excellent read.
Yes, yeah.
It's good. It's like plant horror. Amazing.
And there's lots of people who have people terrified, parents terrified.
Yeah. And the chat. Okay.
Yeah. So the furocumarines, one of the which you can, we've talked about this before. Learning words from reading them, you produce them how you want, pronounce them how you want. This to me sounds like something that you should be spicing something like a furocumarine. But when you add the furocumarine to your skin and then expose it to ultraviolet radiation, from the
does
sun,
some terrible
it does
things.
some nasty, horrible things to you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does it do? So this
So
is what
there's
it
some
looks like.
size. Yeah, that's a standard undergraduate student.
Yeah.
There she is.
Yeah.
Standard.
Yeah.
Good name from her parents.
Yeah. And this you should never do. This is another student.
This is non-standard behavior.
This is non-standard behavior as far as hogweed goes. Do not touch the hogweed, like ever. Because this is what it starts like. You start to get these really interesting blisters. So they're photosensitive, which means that if they get, stay in contact with light, the blistering will become even worse. So if, you do come into contact with hogweed, cover it.
Yeah.
Run to wash with soap and water as fast as you possibly can.
And not just water, because you need to break up the.
Oh,
the because that would just
yeah.
spread it like,
okay.
like poison ivy.
Soap.
So soap and water.
Soap. Very important. Okay. And you'll probably still have damage that's done, but you can help to minimize it, right? If you cover it and then wash off.
And the question in the chat is, why is he touching them? Why are they touching them? And the answer is, I don't know. Why is the person taking a picture?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, "Oh my God, what are you doing?"
Hi.
We talked about this.
Yeah. So don't do it. And what if we told you that North Campus Ravine has giant hogweed? Does it actually? No. Okay, but imagine in our scenario, don't avoid the North Campus Ravine. There is no giant hogweed there. But imagine if we did. So imagine if the North Campus Ravine has recently experienced an infestation of giant hogweed. And so we're trying to decide which ones of these woodlots we are going to give away to the city to develop. Here's a new piece of information related to invasive species.
So it's a whole bunch of things, right? Like you've been adding your familiarity to this system. You've been thinking about the area, the size of it, the place, the number of endemic species, the number, and now the total diversity calculated by just the number of species, diversity correlated or influenced by the abundance of individual species within that. All these things might change which one you're willing to develop. This is a new piece of information. Does the presence or absence of invasive species add to that?
Okay, so given that we now have a little bit more information, you've been following in on the online asynchronous stuff, is there still anything else that you would like to know before we make the final decision? So go ahead and put anything in the chat that you'd still like to know about these three. Is there anything else that you would like to know?
Give away hogweed land. And giant hogweed, yes, Kaplan does sound like it's something that could be in Harry Potter.
Oh, totally.
Does hogweed have any benefits to the ecosystem? That's a great question. And to which species? And are they species that are around here or species that were more closely related to where it was originally?
Yeah. Answer, not so much.
Are there endangered species in these areas? In the online unit, yeah, there are. In the dairy bush.
Yep. Yes. Yeah, you're just dairy bush biased. Okay, severity of garlic mustard, and yes, very good. Okay, another invasive species.
Keep taking courses and do that as your that as a fourth year ecology project.
Yeah, super good. Whether the plot can be repurposed to increase native species populations. Super good. Brownswoods has the bush ash, though,
Blue ash,
right?
no,
Blue ash.
Dairy bush.
That's the dairy bush.
Yeah. And blue ash, you're correct, is the endangered species in there. Great thing. Underground, things are going on. This is one of the things about digitally visiting this forest. There were some pictures that we threw in there of what it looks like in the springtime, because when people traditionally in your class visit this woodlot, they're doing it about this week, so...
Sorry, the bookshelf just fell over.
So I'm going to lean it over here. They visit it at a time of year when you don't see perhaps one of the most abundant plants, and in the springtime, that hole in the dairy bush and in the others is a carpet of trout lily and other spring ephemerals. So these are active plants, but by this time in the year, by the fall, even by the summer, they are only active underground as via their root system, and so there's a whole bunch, let alone all the microbes, the fungus, all the things that are going on underground. Yes, great point. Don't die over there. Thank you. That is always our goal.
Okay.
Good lecture.
Oh,
no
wait.
death.
Okay. So, using your annotation features, which I have re-established, I hope, please go ahead and tell us which one, now, final decision. Which one would you get rid of?
They're doing it with love, though. With hearts.
Yeah, that's nice. None.
I'm going to make an activist statement when we're done here.
Yeah?
None. I like it.
Like it. Oh, no. There we go. Dairy bush!
Oh. I'm not talking to you.
You're not talking. Okay, lots of votes for the North Campus Ravine. Lots of votes for none.
I like it.
Some votes for Browns Woods. Now remember, some votes for the Dairy Bush. Oh no. Remember, I believe when we first asked you, it was mostly concentrated on Browns Woods, right? Yeah. Okay, so we've shifted your ideas over. I plead the third. Okay.
I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is. I know what the fifth is, but okay.
I declare bankruptcy.
Good. Okay. Oh, delete. You deleted them.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
So, one of the things, before we leave this area,
Yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I think I say this in the online unit, but this is not just a made-up scenario. Like all of these documents that you were pointed to, these are university documents, and these are university properties in the scenario. So we made up the hogweed thing, but it could arrive. It certainly could. And while you're at Guelph, and from Guelph's perspective, this is more important. Once you are alumni,
Yeah.
you may hear about plans to develop the forest alongside the dairy bush.
Yep.
That really could happen. And I think one of the things about talking with every successive generation of 1070 students about this scenario that I like is to introduce them to the fact that is a nascent forest that boy, would it be incredible for us if it could be allowed to grow. And yeah. So keep your ears open. We may ask for your attention later on.
And there is precedent associated with, student activism causing the university to make better choices.
Like last term.
Like really recent with respect to the Honeybee Research Institute, that there was a whole pile of money that the university raised for a Honeybee Research Institution, which I think is fabulous. Great. Except for the place that they were originally going to put it would have had a super detrimental effect on our organic farm. Now, if you don't know that we have an organic farm, oh my goodness, I can't wait for you to actually come to campus and check it out, because it is gorgeous. And the things that the researchers are doing there and the student volunteers, if you're at all into botany and agriculture and permaculture, or organic farming, entomology, pollination, and it is a spectacular site that we have on campus.
We did a bunch of projects last fall, a year ago now, in the fourth year ecological methods course. So graduates of this course, 4 years ago, we're running and designing projects to look at pollinator diversity across gardens in the organic farm versus gardens in natural areas like the Dairy Bush Field versus the militarily arranged petunias and pansies across the university campus. Guess which one was the most diverse?
400 species of pollinators in the organic farm. It's delightful, amazing. Okay.
And just a last clarification. Which one is the heritage property? Technically, they all are. So what the university would be proposing to do is probably develop the field of the Dairy Bush, because it's not recognized as a heritage property, or as a natural area, rather, within the university's governance system. The other ones are.
Is it used for food on campus? Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so, hospitality services is super good. So we have like our own hospitality services, our own sort of cafeterias and restaurants and that kind of business. And Mark, 100 Mile Mark on Twitter, is responsible for procurement of food, along with the head chef, VJ. They're all on Twitter, and they buy from the organic farm. And so, I hope you know that Guelph has been voted by students as having the best food in campus food in Canada. They're totally right, and we miss eating there a lot. Okay, moving on to biomes, back to biomes. Oh no! Okay, this stuff is really cool. We want to talk a little bit about biogeography and big trends and big things that we can talk about.
Some Creole. People mention Creole.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knew it?
Okay, because understanding big trends is important, and we like to kind of zoom out for physiology. Next time we're going to zoom in like super, super small, so this is our last opportunity to talk about big things. And so we wanted to sort of get you just reoriented. When we're talking about biomes, we're talking about big trends, big changes. Okay. We can even go bigger. Right? So if we go back here to biomes, you can see that there are big groups, big regions associated with these things, and we can even zoom out even more.
We can take that roughly 24 things.
That's right. And start to even merge them a little bit more. So take a look at these. These are biogeographical regions. These are bigger than biomes. Okay? And our question to you is, what patterns do you see? Take a look, kind of squint your eyes, tilt your head. What can you kind of write one sentence in the chat about a pattern that you see here?
Questions about when the next midterm is.
Is it next Friday the 9th? I thought it was the 13th.
I thought it was the 13th as well, but I don't remember. So, questions about those biogeographic regions, north to south, islandish effect, very continent-oriented. The equator seems important, determined by latitude.
Super good.
Near the equator, Chem 1040.
Yeah.
That affects us, but not the biomes, or the biogeographic regions.
Okay.
Seems to be the most regions and transitions along the equator.
Yep. Yeah, super good. So yeah, big swaths, big patterns.
Super good. Our Burke 02, very Eurocentric naming scheme. Definitely that. In
Totally.
Bailey and yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Antarctic region, for example, we don't even have the Antarctic represented on this map, and that kind of bugs me a little bit. But yeah, certainly. So the naming sucks, but the big patterns are interesting, right? And they do have a lot to do with sort of relative to the equator, and all of that stuff. So super big patterns, really important. One of the things, though, that for me is pretty interesting, I don't know if we have this animated. Yes, we do, is here. Take a look at these three regions. They are the same. They are part of the Antarctic biogeographical region, but they don't really they seem to be like broken up and separated. So what might be some of the reasons for why they would be the same biographical region, but broken up, very much unlike the other regions, which are all kind of tucked together?
An email from Dr. Robertson.
So in the chat,
Go ahead.
what are we thinking?
Water currents?
Water currents, that's a good hypothesis. Yeah.
Pangea?
Yeah, Pangea, latitude.
Plate tectonics.
Very good. Okay.
Yep.
Yes. Now, your water current hypothesis is good. We can definitely test that to see if that's true. The Pangea hypothesis is good. Also, we can test that. It turns out in this case that it's the Pangea plate tectonics hypothesis. But in other cases, water currents do play a role in connecting different habitats. So yeah, there's nothing, or isolating them, exactly. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just this one happens to be the Pangea hypothesis. So yes, at one point, all of these were very likely connected, right? Okay, so understanding then different ways of sort of different large-scale patterns and different types of hypotheses, we can also look within the biographical regions and start to look at distributions of species. So now we're zooming in a little bit and going, okay, so we understand that, this particular warbler, the green warbler, black-throated green warbler, occupies this part of the continent, while these other ones occupy different parts. And take a look at the golden-cheeked warbler, this little tiny part that it occupies right here. And instead of, coming up with the actual reasons, unless you're an uber birder fan, let's start to think about what some of the reasons are that we can explore that might explain at this smaller scale why those species are where they are. So if you could pop some ideas in the chat, that would be great.
Climate, migration patterns, competition. Humans,
Yep.
they can only survive in a limited range. Food availability, predation, small diet range. Resources, they can't fly so far, so they stay in the same area. Species interactions, reality, a really sensitive niche.
Nice.
Yep.
Good.
Prey
Okay.
upon specific insect species, so being driven by the distribution of other things.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Habitat,
Physical barriers. I like
barriers,
that.
yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of that, I think, in North America when you look along the west coast.
Random chance. Thank you.
Aha.
Very good.
Proximity to water, city density.
Yep. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
All of these things might explain it, and I love the random chance one as well because that may also be part of it. So that's really, really great. What might some of the reasons be for some species to have larger distributions than others? Why? What might we, if we're just looking at the black-throated green warbler with this big distribution versus the golden-cheeked warbler, what variables might we start to explore there? Right, given that they're both warblers, so they're both about yay big, and they probably eat, well, who knows, maybe similar types of things. I mean, it's not like one eats pizza and the other eats polar bears, right? So they probably have like some kind of overlap of general food. What might some of the reasons be?
So there's lots of great thoughts already. Faster rates of reproduction, more specialized niche versus more generalized
Yep.
species, a wider diet. Rates in reproduction, population size, migration patterns. That's
Good.
a great one.
Good.
to think about. Yep.
Yep. All of those things are super. Okay. And so what we're trying to do then is to get you to like focus big biogeographical regions. Why might they be? Well, they were probably connected, right? Due to vicariance, plate tectonics, all of that stuff. Now continental, what might explain? And then finally down to two species, what might explain, right? And the things that we would consider to be plausible hypotheses, right? These are educated guesses. I hate educated guesses as a term. I know, won't say it, but they say it in Ontario curriculum. So plausibility, right? Sort of these.
But they also said that we could buy $1 a beer, and that was
plausibility is important. And so what we're doing is we're getting you to think about like the variables that would work at the large scale versus the smaller scale, right? And so I hope that you've recognized that you've done that quite well. For those of you that have been thinking about it in your head or
a
putting
question
it in
here
the chat.
specific to the why do some species have larger ranges than others, and would it be also some random chance? And it's like yes, but less, I would say.
Yeah.
When you're comparing the golden cheeked versus the black throated green warbler,
Yeah.
that's unlikely to be driven by chance alone. Chance can still play an important role, and it's particularly amongst the golden cheek. The smaller you are,
right.
the more important chance can be.
And I'm just looking at where the golden cheek warbler is. I'm pretty unfamiliar with that part of the world, but my guess would be that it's probably pretty dry and desert-like in that area. And maybe this represents like a marshland oasis type thing where it's found.
It has a wall built through it.
It has, right.
Now.
So at this point, the Trump wall may actually interfere with that distribution. But anyway, it seems to me that the conditions around that warbler distribution are probably pretty warbler inhospitable.
I think the other one, before we move on, because we're going to keep talking about this for a second, but one of the things to remember is that you're looking at, this is where, in terms of biases, what we've presented you with is a bias towards where they breed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, of course, recognize that, particularly for migratory things, we have no idea what their range looks like where they don't breed.
Exactly.
And that could have a whole bunch to do with the specificity or success.
We have a fan of the Townsend's warbler. Shout out to the Townsend's warbler then. Yay.
And in fact, some detail from Sichang 04 about the details about the golden cheek warblers.
Thank you.
Always depend on the birders they represent.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I like it.
That's
Awesome.
great. I had no idea. I don't know about warblers. Okay.
There's a huge amount of diversity there in Central Texas. Texas, north to south, is
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of bananas. When I've collected there for ants, it's striking how much diversity there is across that area.
Okay, so the big answers, like large scale stuff, right, is that it could have evolved there or it moved there, right? If we're going to keep it really, really simple. It could be what's called endemic, and you remember endemic from the evolution unit. It means that it evolved there and it is uniquely there, or it could have come from somewhere else. And it could have been extirpated in the original place where it evolved, or it could also be there as well, right? So start to think about ways that we could figure out which one it was. So we're just talking about whether the two possibilities are that it evolved there or that it moved there, right? In the chat, sorry, how could we test which option it is? So what types of things could we do to figure out if it evolved there or if it moved there? In the chat, please. Nice.
I like the all these answers right out of the gate. Fossils, genetic similarities to species in that region.
Yep.
Study the lifestyle of each bird.
Good.
Gene comparison, genome, look for evidence of the same species in other similar genetic habitats, genetic information.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Those are
super good.
Yep.
You can broaden your scale and start to look for the distribution of that species in other places. You can look in the fossil record to see whether they were extirpated in other places.
You can bring together your first unit and your second in evolution and your second unit and go, okay, so if it's dispersed there, maybe that dispersal event was via a small number of things.
Yeah.
And so then once it's expanded, perhaps it's expanded through what we might call a bottleneck. And maybe the genetic diversity has been affected by that.
Yeah, super good. Okay, excellent.
Oh, I think you're saying, so somebody says like the transplant, but they said like the transplant. And I love thinking about a transplant experiment better than it as a transplant.
I like it. If you do bird banding, that's a good way to track.
Yep.
Absolutely, if they're moving around, yes.
And again, yes, super good way. But again, a bias towards bigger things. And so we can't do that, for instance, with the beetles we're going to tell you about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so beetles, New Zealand, totally different place in the world. New Zealand.
Middle Earth beetles.
Yeah. Nerd alert. Okay, so New Zealand, distribution of this beetle, and it's an interesting distribution because it is found almost entirely on the South Island, but one place it is found on the North Island, just on the other side of the Cook Strait. So what might be some of the mechanisms that could explain how this distribution came to be? What are some of the reasons?
And I'm going to give you a little bit of the beetle biology in that this is a flightless beetle.
Flightless, it does not fly. So what could be some of the explanations for how this distribution came to be? If you want to write on the slide, you can, but if you also want to put them in the chat, that's fine too.
Transported by boat, carried by tourists, moved via birds. Humans!
Yep.
Hitching a ride with other species, human transport. The land used to be connected.
Haha. Human interference, human transport, totally. Yeah.
Vehicles and boats.
Yeah,
Vehicles and boats.
Very good. In someone's suitcase, totally. Yeah.
Wood exports are food, yeah. So you guys are familiar with this kind of indirect human transportation. Somebody threw it.
Yeah.
It's bigger than it looks.
Hello! It's a teeny tiny gap. Yeah. Yes. So all of these things are totally plausible, right? How would you go about figuring out which one it was, though? What would you do in order to start to, all of these are plausible hypotheses.
And you've got a
How would
toolkit.
you test it?
So you've got a broad toolkit as an ecologist
What could
and
you do?
evolutionary biologist.
They're good swimmers. I love that. Instead of flying, maybe they swim.
Look for evidence of the land being previously connected. Super.
Pay attention to what it eats and where it lives.
Yeah.
How long has it been there? Good. Good. What else? It's someone's exotic pet.
Maybe
That's
they
pretty
float. You can
exotic,
test that.
yeah.
Yep.
What was happening when it first arrived? Beetle evolved and existed in the time where the land was connected. Yes. Look at when the population increased and when people began traveling.
Oh, and I like this.
Nice.
Right after that, there's a, do other animals migrate the same pattern? So looking for evidence from other species. And that, in a word, that's the discipline of biogeography, which is great. So looking for, okay, we see this with this one species. Let's overlay a bunch of species and then look for a story.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And in fact, a misconception of a biogeographic story led people to believe that hummingbirds migrated on the wings of eagles for quite some time. And they thought it would be impossible for hummingbirds to be able to fly that distance. And so they looked at the pathway of eagle migration, and also it corresponded. So they were like, oh, they migrate together.
I mean, it's not that long ago that we didn't understand European scientists didn't understand about migration at all, and presumed that birds went into the mud and then reemerged in the spring.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So most of these are absolutely plausible, right? The teleportation, less so, but I love it. All of the other ones, though, are totally plausible. And so you look at the timing of things. You look at maybe even the genetic connectivity of the populations, right? So is there evidence of gene flow between them? Or are they isolated populations? That type of thing.
And you're basically two categories in your answers. Of all the different answers that came up, there's answers that are based on movement, or based on, well, movement of the species or movement of the space. So vicariance or dispersal.
Right. So those are large categories. And then within them, we can put all of yours within
Specific
these two
cases.
categories,
Yeah,
right?
So well done. So the thing is, do we tell them the answer?
The answer, I love this, they are a higher being that manipulates time and space. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, the actual answer in this case, again, it isn't because, most of you got the wrong answer. It's just that we don't know what the answer is for this one, but researchers and scientists do. And so it turns out that in this case, it is the result of vicariance. It is the result of water levels being different, such that originally this dot was part of the northern region of a continuous distribution.
So in the Pliocene, the North and South Islands, the way that they're viewed, were different.
We're differently connected.
Water levels were different.
Yeah.
So movement not of plate tectonics, but in this case, but of movement of ocean levels.
And so the current distribution does represent a barrier to gene flow. So it isn't, going back and forth on, on the feathers of birds, which happens, by the way. That's totally possible. But in this case, it isn't. So there is a barrier to gene flow, which can result in a whole bunch of things, right? Possibly a speciation event, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, and some observations from people who know more about New Zealand, that many species in New Zealand actually follow this distribution pattern. Yes?
Good.
And a request to have a Lord of the Rings remake with hummingbirds.
Oh, good job. Yeah, although we might also want to include the kakapo. Do you know what the kakapo is? Do you know what the kakapo is? Oh my goodness, Google it. It is the best bird. It is endemic to New Zealand. It is a flightless parrot with a big personality. Yeah. Okay. So, big biogeography patterns and trends.
Yeah. So if we go back one slide, and take a couple of slides. Just going to jump for a second. Sorry. And look at those colors.
Yep.
Take a look at how they're spread across how we live on the planet Earth right now, and then align them with these colors here about where some of these regions are. So we think about distribution. You can kind of think about distributions. In this case, they're mapping. You could map those colors to historic distributions of land masses to end up predicting similarities, taxonomic or community level similarities, and construct large matrices of beta diversity to compare between two different regions and make some predictions about who ought to be more similar and who ought to be more different.
And by taking a look at the fossil record and the things that used to live, for example, in Antarctica, we can get a lot of information, right? So, for example, you see here there's a fossilized fern that is found in Antarctica. A fern is a plant that enjoys much warmer temperatures than the Antarctic temperatures and much moister conditions, so much more wet conditions than moister than
more
moist than currently exist, right? So the presence of a fern tells you that Antarctica was probably a lot closer to the equator than it is now. The other thing that has been found in Antarctica is the presence of a terrestrial animal, this one right here, this terrestrial reptile. Now, going back, the terrestrial reptile couldn't swim large distances, right? It was terrestrial, not marine, which speaks to the fact then that Antarctica was probably connected to a whole bunch of other places if its distribution is found also in Antarctica. Bringing those two bits together, what we know about the biology of those two species, we can gain a lot of information about what the conditions used to be like and where these continents used to be on the planet, right? Both by looking at the plants as well as the distribution of the animals, which is kind of cool. But we want to kind of wrap it up a little bit and think a little bit about our history and the human experience of all of this. And this map represents possibly the human story in terms of movements around the planet, where we originally evolved, and how our populations and genetic diversity has changed over time. And it's an important story that I think is really quite cool if we wrap together all of the stories of evolution, all of the stuff that we've learned, as well as ecology, to understand that if you see a distribution like this, a completely global distribution, especially in a species like humans, you can infer a lot of information, right? Clearly, the realized niche that we occupy in Australia is going to be different than the one that we occupy in the Arctic, right? Or in South America. With the different biogeographical regions as well as the different biomes, the fact that we're spread throughout, first of all, is fairly unique in the world, but also really speaks to the diversity that our species has sort of evolved to be, right? And the relationships that we have with the environment, right? Thinking about things like migration patterns and the founder effect, though, where in the world, based on this story, where in the world would you imagine the greatest amount of genetic diversity in the human species would be? So go ahead and put a stamp where you think the greatest amount of genetic diversity is. Super good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You got it.
You got it. Okay. So yes, the original populations of humans are, endemic to Africa. We know this based on all sorts of information, including genetic information. It's fascinating, and to this day, there is more genetic diversity in Africa than anywhere else. Where then would you anticipate in the indigenous populations would there be the least amount of genetic diversity? Good. At the tail ends. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And that's the result of founder effect, right? Where populations moved over generations, right? So out of Africa, across Asia, it wasn't individuals that were moving this great distance. It was subsets of populations that established themselves. And when we take subsamples from a population, we reduce the genetic diversity that moves on, that then forms the next population that then moves on. And if we take a look at genetic diversity across the globe, that pattern holds. And anybody that's interested in psychology or linguistics, it also holds for language. There's more diversity in syllable formation in Africa, in African languages, than anywhere else in the world. The languages in Africa are deep and rich in terms of the sounds that are being produced compared to other languages. It's really quite fascinating. So, okay, if we clear then and we take a look at one place in the world that I'm deeply kind of connected to. I spent quite a few years living in a place called Ushuaia at the southern tip of Argentina, just in the BIOL channel, which is this area here. Here are the Malvinas Islands, here is South Georgia, and here is the Antarctic Peninsula. It's a fascinating place with a fascinating history, especially when it comes to the indigenous cultures that lived there. So here we're kind of zooming in. Here is Tierra del Fuego. It's a big island. There are a whole bunch of other islands that belong to Chile, and this is the Argentine side of that border. And this is what Ushuaia looks like today. It's a modern city. It kind of has like a Whistler feel to it because it's got a young population of people that are there to ski. The Canadian ski team, for example, goes there in the summer because it's the only place in the summer that has a working ski hill. So you can be a ski bum there and live quite a nice life. You can also see the ships that are ready to sail to Antarctica, and that's why I was living there. And when I was living there, I spent quite a bit of time learning about the indigenous peoples that were extirpated and exterminated in sort of very deliberate ways, especially these people here. These are called the Xaltnam, although they were called Las Onas, which means the others, by the people that lived closer to the coast. These are the Jamana. So the Jamana lived on the coastline, and the Xaltnam, or Las Onas, lived in the plains just to the north. Genetically, almost identical, right? We're talking about low genetic diversity because these were the last colonizers of part of the mass migration of humans. But phenotypically very, very different in the way that the way that they looked. The Jamana spent most of their time huddled up close to big fires because they didn't actually make clothing because they were so intimately connected with the marine environment. They spent a lot of time in the water and a lot of time hunting marine mammals and eating oysters and mussels. Las Onas, or the Xaltnam, were terrestrial people that hunted the guanaco, which was like a llama. And they wore clothing made of the guanaco. They were very tall people and very lean compared to the Jamana. So phenotypically very different, genetically very, very similar, right? Because of the founder effect, it was that movement across generations that led to those differences.
If you saw the BBC Seven Worlds thing, the Wanaka, there's a story in there about Wanaka and Puma.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
They're
Thank
big.
you. Now, Cristina Calderon is the last of the Jamana. There are no more, and there are no more Xaltnam. There isn't even one left as a result of intentional genocidal acts by the Spanish occupiers as well as the Italian occupiers of Argentina and Chile. But Cristina, you can learn, yes, yeah, it's terrible, but Cristina is the last person to speak the traditional Jamana language. So not only are we losing the incredible diversity and heritage of her people, but also the language of her people. And she has been working tirelessly to preserve the language. And you can buy poetry and other books by her. She lives on the Chilean side of Tierra del Fuego, and she's the last one, unfortunately. If you're at all interested in the human story and the way that humans have come to be from a biological perspective, here is an excellent start, talking about colonization, talking about how the resources on the different continents helped shape the different cultures. It's a fascinating read, so please.
So it's about 20 years old now.
Yeah.
21 years old now, but it's still
still
amazing.
holds.
And I'm posting a link right now
Okay.
in the chat
Cool.
to a National Geographic documentary about
Awesome.
about the book.
We are over time. Sorry about that. And here is your homework. It is pretty clear, I hope, in its description. Go ahead and calculate all of those things. Please do it. And we will have this exact question for you
Major
next
Easter egg.
time. Yeah. So go ahead and work through these things. It brings together density dependent, density independent, population curves, carrying capacity, all of that stuff into one question. And so there you go. And it is 10:30, so we're totally over time. And so we'll say
Take care of
goodbye.
each other the next couple of days.
Yeah, because we'll have
there's
stuff to
lots
talk
going on.
about.
Yep.
Take care.